Hi, folks. I'm Father Joe Grimaldi. You can call me Joe, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast. But now, here's our host and friend, Ken Calvert.
Hi, everybody. I'm Ken Calvert alongside my dear friend, Father Joe Grimaldi, and welcome to the Father Joe Podcast. The Father Joe Grimaldi Podcast, proudly supported by our good friends at Hoot McInerney Star Lincoln. The Lincoln Summer Invitation Sales event is in its final days. That means right now is the best time to purchase or lease any one of the exciting Lincoln vehicles. Do you realize it's already time to start thinking about the all-new 2020 lineup that's coming in? Yeah, that means it's just a matter of weeks before our inventory lot will be overflowing, and we need to make our best deals to free up that space. That's right, the Lincoln MKC, the Nautilus, the Navigator, the Aviator, Continental, MKZ, they are all priced to move and move now. Stop by Hoot McInerney Star Lincoln, 12 Mile and Telegraph in Southfield. Mention you heard about it on the Father Joe Podcast, and you'll get extra savings, additional savings, oh yeah. Shop online at starlincoln.com. That's starlincoln.com, and tell them Father Joe sent you. As we record, today is the anniversary, the 18th anniversary of 9/11. Without a doubt, in my lifetime, the most impactful event that I can ever remember, with the exception of being a third grader, the assassination of John F. Kennedy. 9/11, because I was an adult, I would have been 51 years old, I was on the radio, I was called into work immediately, all hands on deck. I remember trembling, driving to work. I watched it happen. Everyone knows the backstory. As we do this right now, I get emotional just thinking about it. You were in Hawaii at the time, so it had to be early in the morning.
It was. I was getting ready for Mass, actually, shaving, and I had the news on in the background. And at first what I saw was incredible, in the true sense of the word. Mm-hmm. I couldn't believe that it would be anything real. It seemed like something that they were getting ready for a movie of some sort. And then, as time went on, I began to realize, this is not something this is something that's happening. It brought chills. I had chicken skin, as they say, and this can't be. And of course, in Hawaii, we were getting almost that it had already taken place, because we're so much earlier than we are on the East Coast. So it was something that we got a full picture of it. But anyway, those events are very close to my mind, particularly because at the time I was serving the Diocese of Honolulu as a Vicar General. So I was asked to speak with the higher up among the military on the following morning.
Ooh.
And I was to speak at Punch Bowl. For those of you who are not familiar with that word, Punch Bowl is the National Cemetery of the Pacific. It has a prominent place in Hawaii, way up on top. And it's called the Punch Bowl because it's in a crater. And so the crater is shaped like a punch bowl. In any case, their military are very active there. On that particular day, they had gathered the higher-ups, the generals and so on and so forth, who were the decision makers and things of that sort, of the Navy, of the Army, and the Air Force. So it was quite a moment, and I was asked to speak with them. And you start, thinking, what can I say? They're expecting something religious, and the best I could come up with was Paul's words, basically, as St. Paul, and basically that there is nothing that can separate us from the love of God. Despite this horrible situation, God is with us. The other thing that comes to my mind at a time like that, it did come to my mind. Paul says clearly that where evil abounds, grace abounds even more. Now, it doesn't sound grammatically correct, but it surely brings the meaning across, that we can't forget that. And so then you scratch your head and you say, well, what good can come out of that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a lot of good. First of all, what comes to mind real quickly is the first responders.
Yes.
Their loving, caring ways. Then the people themselves being united. I don't think our country was that united in a long time. And it was truly united. And one of the things I think they began to realize, what's again is part of our beliefs as Christians, at least, if not Catholics, part of our beliefs is this, that as human beings, we share a common vulnerability. And I think we have to keep that in mind. Whether we're prosperous or whether we're poor, we are vulnerable. And that's one of the things we have to keep in mind. And it's all of us. Despite color, creed, whatever, we are united because we are humans, part of the human race. We have a shared vulnerability. What do I mean by that? Basically, life is very tenuous. It's not something we can take for granted. And yet we do so often, we take it for granted. Mm-hmm. So many things just go right by us without realizing how precious life is. And I think once we become self-sufficient, thinking that nothing can hurt us, nothing can come against us, and then all of a sudden a tragedy occurs, wow, we're devastated because we thought we were not vulnerable, and yet we are vulnerable. And it's then that people come to the fore to help others, and that is the goodness that comes from tragedy. I certainly don't think there's anything wrong with people being wealthy. I think that's a good thing, okay, if it's used properly. But being wealthy very often can make people so self-sufficient, how should I put it? Their thinking becomes that they are invulnerable, not vulnerable. Well, they are. Like anybody else, they are. And what comes across, though, is because of our shared humanity, people do come to the fore. Right now, we're in the midst of experiencing different kinds of tragedies, natural disasters that are occurring around the world. Well, even there, for example, people who had beautiful livelihoods have lost everything. And it's then that they begin to realize the importance of family, the importance of faith, and so on. And it's then that we see other people coming to the aid of others. Because, let's face it, whether we're rich or poor, we need other people. Mm-hmm. We need the help of other people. We need to help other people. I think all of these things are so important.
I'll beg this question. Why would a wonderful, caring, loving God allow something like this to happen? Now, you hear that question over and over and over again. But given the size, the scale of 9/11, New York City, the World Trade Centers, both being attacked, going down, so many dead, so many still dying as a result, our emotions still raw, yet children, people, young persons not even aware, having to learn about it now, yet with you and I, it's so fresh. But why would an all-caring, all-loving God allow something like that to happen?
That question is related to free will. When God created us, He created us all with free will, which means we can follow the will of God, or we could just turn our back to the will of God. So, evil exists, there's no question. And God is not going to stop it because we're free. He doesn't want to take the free will away. That's the best way that I can explain it. Mm-hmm. And so that means to me that if people want to do evil, they're able to do evil, despite the fact It goes against the grain, if you want. Why would they want to do evil against human beings? Well, they do. And so it's important that I think we have a realization of who we are as human beings, because we share vulnerability as a human race. Mm-hmm. And when we realize that, we know family is important, we know good friends are important, we know our faith is important. All of these things come to the fore once we realize our vulnerability.
Yeah, within days afterwards, you're right. We hugged our family a little closer, a little harder. We went to church immediately,
right,
and we would light candles. We followed this, went on for weeks and months.
Sure.
It was part of our life for over a year. The first anniversary was very, very tough.
Sure it was.
And the individual stories, the chaplain, I wish I could recall his name. I can't right now. But a Catholic priest dying as a firefighter, mm-hmm. the chaplain for that particular station. So many sad stories, and yet when I think about the saddest stories for me, it was the funeral services, the days afterwards.
Sure.
They were just heart-wrenching. And I was on radio. I got up. It was a typical day. I did middays, WCSX in Detroit. And it was just another day. I was watching a little television, doing a little show prep, when all of a sudden, boom, it happened. We don't need to go through it again, but they immediately said, get here now. And I got in there, and we were literally trying to do radio like we'll never do again. I never hope or want for any other broadcaster to have to go through a day like that. We thought the country was under attack. We didn't know where the next plane was coming from. Well, we all know the story. Planes being grounded, people afraid to move, people looking up in the sky. It was just an incredible, life-changing moment. I told you that I just wish, in a way, when I see it coming up on the calendar, I just regret it coming up on the calendar.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. You know, what you said, though, brings to mind that something that all of us, you and me and others, quickly forget. We can learn from those experiences, from the funerals, from the overwhelming bombardment of evil upon us. We can learn. However, we don't often take the opportunity to learn. And what do I mean by that?
Yes.
We can learn because we can love our neighbor better. We can try to understand that, they're completely different than I am. But we have in common humanity. And that should urge us even further to try to get along better with people we don't understand. You know, for example, racism is alive and well. And it's a stupid type of prejudice, because when you come down to it, they bleed the red blood as we all bleed. So we're all together, human nature being what it is. And so instead of being against one another, we should be able to love one another. It's easier said than done. It doesn't happen so easily, but those are the things I think that come to my mind once we think about the funerals of the victims of 9/11, and then think about the survivors trying to put their lives together after they've lost husbands and fathers and wives and so
still
on. And they still are because it continues,
of whatever the substances were in the air or whatever. You know, you just saw that beautiful Jon Stewart compassionate plea before the Congress.
I did, yes.
They did their jobs. Now, damn it, do yours.
Correct. Yeah.
Why do we have to be reminded? You just said it beautifully. But it's now in the rear view mirror.
Of course.
And it pisses me off.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it hasn't gotten better.
No.
It has not gotten better. And I don't want to take a beautiful moment, an anniversary like today, and say, damn it, people, it's not just a moment in the history books anymore. Have we learned nothing from this?
Yeah. I just want to say this, and I said it at the very beginning. Where evil abounds, grace, if you want to substitute the word good, grace abounds even more. Those are the words of St. Paul. They're not my words, but I think they bring to the moment that we shouldn't lose hope. I think we have to move forward with our lives, but we should try to remember what we forget so easily.
That's a great line. It's a powerful line. Then why do we? Why do we just get up the next day? We continue to live in this Pollyanna type of an existence. Like, oh, it's gonna be okay. Again, have we learned nothing? I think we've learned a lot. Have we put into practice what we've learned?
No.
Okay.
No. But the other thing I'm saying, security sometimes has a way of fooling us. When things are going well, then we start to think nothing could possibly hurt us. Mm-hmm. And we don't say it out loud, but we act like that, okay? And then all of a sudden, tragedy hits, whether it's 9/11 or whether it is a tornado or whatever the case might be, we lose so much. And you wonder why. It all comes down to this. Whether you're poor or rich, we're human beings, and therefore we need each other.
I think it's important for all of us to remember one thing, that as a nation, as Catholics, as human beings, we're all vulnerable.
Exactly.
We all better be ready for our personal 9/11.
Correct.
I believe that if you don't live that way, not paranoid, but realize that quickly, your world can change.
Correct.
And I want you to help me through that real quickly. How do we stay prepared for our personal 9/11?
I think you mentioned something that's very important, is the fact that we have to realize that what we have is a gift from God. It's a precious gift from God, and that's our life. We have to realize that our life is very, very fragile. Once we realize that, maybe we'll start treating things in a better way. Maybe we'll start appreciating the gifts that we get from God in a better way. Maybe we start looking at people in a different way. We start looking at their souls and not what they look like and not what they wear. I think these are the important things that we have to do, is appreciate our common human nature that we all have. And I think it means that we are all vulnerable.
I want to thank you for doing this. 9/11, 2019, 18 years later. 18 years later.
Hard to believe, yeah.
It's so hard to believe, and yet it's so fresh in our minds. I think about the Kennedy assassination. I think about the Challenger explosion. It's one of those situations where you remember exactly where you were when it happened. And exactly. I pray to God that doesn't happen again in my lifetime.
Yeah, it's just that we shouldn't take things for granted. We're the United States, so nothing could ever hurt us.
Right.
Well, that's a bad attitude. Yeah. We know that.
We know that now.
Yeah, and so that's one of the things we have to remember, that no matter where we are, we're all vulnerable.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us. A special edition of the Father Joe Grimaldi Podcast. I'm Ken Calvert, and we will see you next time on the Father Joe Podcast.
I look forward to seeing you. This is Father Joe Grimaldi, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Father Joe Podcast.
If you'd like, you can email us. It's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. That's frjoepodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook. Simply search Father Joe Grimaldi. And thanks for listening, everyone.